welcome to my community and an equally warm welcome to our viewers around the world, those of you who continue to follow us weekly via the World Wide Web. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, as always. Thanks for joining us. On the afternoon of Wednesday, October the 19th, 1983, there was breaking news on almost every radio and television station in this region, and that news was the same. Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop, and a number of his cabinet members were lined up against the wall at Fort Rupert and executed. What occurred on that day was a culmination of a series of events that went back more than 4 years, when the Geary administration was overthrown and Maurice Bishop seized the government without having a general election. We begin with a Barbadian who was a regular visitor to Grenada during that period. Carl Springer places things in perspective.
I would go to Grenada. I would take my car and drive to the airport and take the next flight getting to St. Vincent and then Grenada, off into Grenada. And I spent them there the weekend. I got into Grenada. And there was a tenseness in Grenada. I never asked what it was, and people don't want to tell you. There was a girl who used to work in the Ministry of Home Affairs. Her father lived on top of the hill where the school and the prison is. And she would come to look for me and we would chat. But this time she ain't talking. I called the father, not a word. Everybody's silent as death. So I said to myself, hearing little things going on, and a fellow would drop a remark in a rum shop, you're going to one, the airport. You're going towards the airport with a friend going away, going through Grenada, you're here talk. Go on, get rid of Gary. But they're saying it too low. Because Gary had a mongoose gang. They labeled them that. And these people, it is said, used to get rid of you. And I don't want to get over it, so I keep my mouth shut. But I knew Gary before, because whenever I go to Grenada and Tantine, we would have a cricket match, and he would turn up late, dressed in white, and come late. And he's supposed to bat. Make one run, hold your bat in both with one hand, and pretend he could bat. I know him like that. Come here, go to New York Club with my aunt. And we sit down and drink together. Go to Grenada, he come by Barclay and Paddock then. They teach him all used to live. But this silence, and I came back to Barbados. I got people in Barbados, Grenadian, talking here now about what can happen and what is not going to happen.
Immeasurable damage has been done to our dear land and people by the enemies of progress. Peaceful, loyal citizens and residents have been made to face great inconveniences. The enemies of progress have done more damage to Grenada than Hurricane Janet. The tourist industry has been virtually crippled. Hotel owners, hotel workers, taxi drivers, vendors, farmers, nutmeg producers have all suffered considerably. Trade unions have called illegal strikes. Businessmen and women have defied the laws of the land. Several other people have committed breaches of the law. However, now should not be a time for recriminations and reprisals, but rather, now is the time for goodwill. Now is the time for unity. Now is the time for reconstruction. And so, I now appeal to all Grenada in its totality to join heads, hearts, and hands in unity to repair the damage done and to build a Grenada for ourselves and for posterity. I invite all opposition factions to let me hear from them as soon as possible regarding the reaction to my appeal. God bless you all as a new nation is born.
Reaction is that it is a most unpopular Independence Day. Is that how you obviously you wouldn't describe it that way, but I mean, how popular is it among the mass of people here?
I would say 95%.
And what happens to the other 5%?
Oh, well, there are people who are always willing and ready to disrupt any institution. If it were another government, they'd do the same thing.
And Maurice Bishop is amongst that 5% spoken of by Sir Eric Geary. He was arrested. Immediately after his arrest, a number of his associates spoke with members of the media.
We've applied for bail. One of my legal friends have gone off to get the magistrate, and to date, whether the offence is a summary or indictable one, the magistrate might name his fee for bail, and if that is agreed, we can have him out today.
We can go further to tell you that magistrate was contacted this morning, Ernest John, as far as we're told, and he said that he's washed his hands. He's not getting involved.
What do you think is?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of the magistrate?
Ernest John.
Ernest John.
He said he's not getting involved. He's been held on arms and ammunition charge. Obviously, we look at Maurice as one of our two leaders, and therefore in his absence, we're naturally going to have to keep cool until we've got him, then we can regroup and rethink. We've never said at any time that our motive or our ideas was one of force to overthrow the government.
Well, it seems as though, lots of charges in the past are being created, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if this one were.
How do you view his arrest?
I expected it.
Why?
Because he has what lots of people don't have, which is a brain.
How do you mean that?
Well, the gentleman who is in charge of the country is against anyone who has a brain, and anyone who can think and reason like a human, which is what my husband can do.
Angela Bishop sharing her views on her husband, who was arrested on gun charges by the Geary administration. At this point in time, Carl Springer was alarmed by the increasing number of manufactured goods that was entering the island.
And I said, where do you get this furniture from? These guns from? And I got to understand there were people overseas coming in with them, and everybody at the airport and the seaport that were of this thinking would be people to put these things aside and hide them from the other people who weren't talking to them. God, Geary had his friends. Bishop had his friends. Bishop used to come here to Barbados and talk.
Oh yes, Maurice Bishop visited Barbados regularly during that period and often spoke with reporters, keeping them apprised of the situation in Grenada. Here is an extract from a recording done in 1979. The reporter was the late Arnon Dial.
We feel it is important that the Caribbean Sea should be officially delimited as a zone of peace, free from intimidation, free from outside bullying, free from the use or threat of force against the people of the region. We feel that our people have a right to build their own processes in their own way, and we feel it is more than time that America gets to understand that this region belongs to the people of the region and not to the Americans.
Are you going to raise the matter at the UN?
Yes, I certainly shall.
And about my mother and his father. Because my friends carry me to all these people. So I can't call anybody in Canada in America, because they ain't talking either. Nobody is saying anything. And I met Tom somewhere. He ain't saying a thing to you. Suddenly, there's this confusion in Grenada. There was a guy earlier with me, his son, I think he got killed. His name was featured in the paper last week, this son. He was the ringleader of this thing. And these fellas wake up one morning and got on his uniform, nobody knew where the uniform come from, and took over Grenada. So there was like people in the country banding themselves together, and you know that this is going to happen and that going to happen. Grenada was a secret thing. And the Cubans knew more what was going to happen than people in the Caribbean. But Tom Adams, he got in touch with the lady from Dominica. He got in touch with the man from America. He got in touch with one or two other people. Some Barbadians, some Caribbean people didn't want to touch it at all, because they may have to cope with the firepower that was coming to them.
In the early hours of Tuesday, March 13, 1979, a movement against one of the region's longest-serving leaders, Eric Matthew Gary, finally found expression in an armed assault on the country's army headquarters. 34-year-old lawyer-politician Maurice Bishop, at the head of a revolutionary army, had created a precedent in the Commonwealth Caribbean, the overthrow of an elected government by armed revolt.
We believe that this is truly a victory for the people of Grenada. The broadest masses of our people, workers, farmers, fishermen, agricultural workers indeed, the youths in particular, the women, the middle classes in general, were all involved one way or another in this particular struggle. We see it as being truly a revolutionary upheaval. We say this, that when yesterday we found ourselves forced to take a decision to attack the army barracks this morning, we of course were not sure as to precisely what would happen after that. We found ourselves driven to this course, not only because of the accumulation of daily repression over the past years by the Gary dictatorship, but more particularly because in recent times our people have found two things in particular, just in the last week, that they felt they could not take anymore. One was a very obviously fraudulent, fake, and farcical electoral revision, which they were foisting on the people of Grenada so as to perpetuate further their rule by bullet while pretending the ballot was being used. The second was, Gary yesterday said he was going off to America. Well, didn't really say, in fact. We managed to find out through our inside contacts. And what we were able to discover in a concrete way from our sources within the army and within the police was that the plan was to time his departure with the mass slaughter of our leadership. And we decided that the time had come when we could not take that. I say that on Saturday last, for example, most of the leadership of our party had to be underground. And over the last 3-4 nights, that is the way in which we had to be. And this had to do with a number of searches which the government had gotten going again. On Saturday, more than 150 policemen searched our respective houses and forced us once again to be on the run. It is clear that the time had come when a very substantial number of people in our country had decided that the time had come to fight back, that there was no more point in running and ducking, being beaten, being murdered, being searched, over and over again. All the arbitrariness that has characterized this regime, all the repression, the people had gotten to the point where they felt that the time had come to fight back. A sentiment which we shared, a sentiment which we gave concrete expression in our actions this morning.
The action was hastily planned 10 hours before its execution, but the anti-Gary movement had been gaining momentum over the years. Sir Eric had been accused of crimes which included murder, and the agitation became more intense after independence in 1974. It was about this time that the New Jewel movement joined the fight against Gary and his administration.
We have made it clear what our position is. We are not interested in a bloodletting. We do not see ourselves as soldiers or guerrillas. We see ourselves as political people who are concerned to bring bread and justice to our people. We find that we are forced to take up arms because of the situation in our country, and that is the way it was. And right now, the way we see it is that the first task of the new government will be in that order, to restore order quickly, to consolidate our position, and thereafter to immediately begin the job of restoring and indeed expanding those human rights of our people, which they have been deprived of these past 5 years.
A peculiar feature of the revolution was a marked absence of bloodshed during the period of upheaval, in contrast to similar experiences in other parts of the world. In the case of Grenada, there was virtually no disruption and no known mass killings, with only 3 deaths in the takeover. This new leftist brand of politics in Grenada had opened up implications, though, not only for the country, but for the wider Caribbean community. It was in light of this that representatives from all the independent English-speaking Caribbean states, except Trinidad and Tobago, met hurriedly in Barbados to discuss the development. But the Grenadians at home were bent on protecting their revolution.
The only possibility of any slight harm to the revolution can come only from external sources.
The only way in which they are going to be successful, any governments or mercenaries or organizations or groups or individuals who wish to come in to try to destroy the fruits of the revolution which we have fought for, will be by getting a barren island, because we are going to fight with the last ounce of our strength to defend the integrity of what we have fought for and the gains which we feel we have made so far and the benefits which we intend to bring to the broad masses of our people.
I don't know the inner thing, but I know it's only after it's all over that I went back to Grenada. And I spent, but even the people that you spent with don't want to mention anything about it in Grenada, because they know who's listening to you. And as one lady put it to me, we have to purge the whole country of some set of people before we can free good going down by the carnage. You call it the carnage, huh? We're going to be the carnage. And that's a place I used to go. They had a place called the Cactus, a bar. I used to hang out there. But you're afraid to go. But then there was people in the crowd in the country who feed all Bajans down there. Oh, not to be down here, they caused us, to blame Barbados for what happened. And that time we went down, they heard us talk. I went back to Grenada since. I stayed at a Bajan living in Belmont, a shopkeeper that he used, family live across there. And he said, listen, man, you come down here the wrong time. You can't go, these fellas used to go with, you don't know who they are. Stay up cool, stay here. And I scarcely went into town. And that's a place, I went into town once. I didn't go to Grand Roy to look for Kiefer Roberts, no way. I didn't go on the hill. I didn't go over the hill to look for another. Because a lot of fellas in university got the same name, If find one Roberts here, you find 10, and all kind of things, so in the teaching service. And I got it, I never went back to Grenada.
March 13th, 1979 came. Maurice Bishop seized power. He proclaimed himself as the leader of Grenada. He is now being questioned in that capacity by reporter Arnon Dial.
Turning out to Grenada. During the past week, there were reports of 2 Grenadians who were being held by the authorities in the U.S. In connection with alleged arms trafficking to Grenada was seen in St. George's during the past week. Could you explain their presence in Grenada at this stage?
Well, there's nothing to explain. The 2 young Grenadians, Wadali and Humphrey, as I'm sure you know, have been facing charges in America. Charges which, as far as we are concerned, were not charges that had any great relevance to America. We do not regard that they committed any criminal offense in America. Naturally, our position was that we were going to make every diplomatic effort we could to get them released. And to this end, I, for one, have been in contact with the American authorities. And other ministers, including the Attorney General, have been trying through diplomatic channels to ensure their release. This was unsuccessful, and it appears that they decided to take different steps. All I can tell you at this point, because we have had no approach from the American government, is that Grenadians are very happy to see Wadali and Humphrey back. That's really all I can say at this point.
Still in Grenada, recently there has been attacks by newspapers throughout the region. To the effect, they were stating that the People's Revolutionary Government in Grenada is just as unpopular as the regime that they ousted. Do you care to elaborate on that as well?
Yes, well, needless to say, that is totally without foundation. The reality is that Grenada is in the midst of a revolutionary process. There are people who would like to pretend that what took place on the 13th of March was nothing unusual. We know different. It was unusual. It was a fundamental break with the past, certainly in terms of the method by which power can be transferred in this region, the English-speaking Caribbean. We regard that we are building a revolutionary process that has fundamental implications for those who have been accustomed to exploiting the region for profits. And it also has fundamental implications for a tiny minority of parasites in our society who believe that workers have no rights, who believe that they have the right to hijack prices on a daily basis, who believe they're above the law. We do not accept these assumptions. It also has fundamental implications for certain elements in the mass media, in the Caribbean, and indeed internationally. Because one of the assumptions that we are challenging, and we are very serious about this, is the whole concept of a free and responsible press in the context and in the manner in which that is defined, has been defined by the colonialists. We reject that definition altogether.
Later, in an interview with CBC's Dr. Sharon Marshall, he summarized his style of government.
It is a form of democracy that emphasizes not only elections and electability, not only for a few minutes and 5 years you become important, but a form of democracy that emphasizes responsibility, accountability, participatory mechanisms, benefits to the people, and also, of course, elections. We think that's the true meaning of Abraham Lincoln's dictum, government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That's what we are building in Grenada.
The opinions of his CARICOM partners were important to Mr. Bishop's regime, though.
We have always made it clear that the #1 plank of our foreign policy is good neighborliness, that we do want the best possible relations with all of our neighbors, that when relations are strained, a little abnormal, we work consciously towards trying to improve them. That has been our history. That is still our position. Therefore, we don't believe there's any need to convince anybody. Those people who ask us any questions, whatever the questions are, we always give open and frank answers. I have said, for example, to different heads of government, that if you are concerned about Grenada, we are quite happy to let you open a consulate in Grenada. We would even give you a building free of cost, so you can have your own person permanently stationed in Grenada. And therefore, whenever your nationals come to our country, for example, you would have the opportunity of seeing what they do. I've also said to them that this is a small island. If a good breeze blows in Grenada, you feel it in all parts of the island. So the question of monitoring what is happening in Grenada is quite easy. Our society is open. It's a free society. And in that situation, frankly, we don't think there should be any problem. It's just that some leaders, unfortunately, have chosen to respond to the adverse negative propaganda against the country. And I think this has had some negative impact on them. We have always been very concerned in Grenada about the closeness of Caribbean people, about people coming together to become as united as possible. As you know, Grenada has a long history of a federation tradition, a federal tradition. The T. Albert Marichaud, son of Grenada, was called in the Caribbean the father of the West Indies Federation. So we've always had a very, very strong position on this question. It comes in part because we see the Caribbean as really one Caribbean. We see our people in the Caribbean as one family. And therefore, to us, it's extremely important for us to always work hard at the question of bringing about a greater closeness of the people.
After 4 years of being Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop was assassinated by his own men. October the 19th, 1983.
Bishop's death had been the culmination of months of intense ideological struggle between opposing factions in the NJM, contesting the direction in which the party should proceed. Bishop, a pragmatic socialist, seemed to be having second thoughts about his party's socialist experiment and had not only held unofficial discussions with officials of the U.S. State Department during an earlier visit to Washington, but had also given assurances to the CARICOM heads of government that elections would have been held in Grenada by 1985. Bernard Cord, Bishop's deputy and trusted friend, and his supporters, on the other hand, wanted to take the NJM further down the path of Marxist-Leninist communism. Things quickly came to a head, and on Bishop's return to Grenada from an East European trip in October, he was quickly placed under house arrest by supporters of Bernard Cord on the Central Committee of the NJM. Maurice Bishop was put under relentless pressure to sign a power-sharing agreement which would have given de facto control to Cord and his supporters. Bishop refused, and in so doing, signed his own death warrant. On the morning of his execution, Bishop had in fact been rescued by hundreds of secondary school children from his home, where he had been kept under house arrest for 6 days.
Now you have these two men there keeping guard of the Bishop area, so they were easily overpowered. I mean, if they tried to shoot the people, then they don't have many rounds to do it with. So they were overpowered, and Bishop was released, and obviously he was dazed because he didn't know what to do. Here he suddenly released, and what to do from there on. But eventually he was taken up to Fort Rupert, and I understand that he sent for more arms to think. But once that was being done, the PRA, People's Revolutionary Army, they panicked. Partly General Austin must have given orders. They had that to go up there and captured them, whether to kill them or whatever. So the guys went there, soldiers, main soldiers, and soldiers are scared when they get an instruction. They are too scared not to say, I'm not doing it.
Grenadians will never forget the events of October 19th, 1983, the day when Maurice Bishop, Prime Minister and leader of the New Jewel movement, together with colleagues Jacqueline Kreft, Eunice Whiteman, Evelyn Bullen, Evelyn Maitland, Keith Haling, Norris Bain, and Fitzroy Bain, were lined up against a wall at Fort Rupert St. George's by members of the People's Revolutionary Army and shot in cold blood. Hundreds of other Grenadians, including women and children, present at Fort Rupert hurtled to their deaths, or in many cases sustained serious injury in the panic which ensued. To this day, little information has been forthcoming with respect to the exact number of people who actually died or were seriously injured on that ill-fated day.
They were shot in a very brutal way, torn to pieces up there. And then they imposed a 24-hour curfew, which is kind of a stupid thing. You have people dying, people getting sick, people have to feed their cows and all this thing, and you're having an indefinite 24-hour curfew. Of course, people can comply with it, and you can't shoot all of them. So in the meantime...
Can I ask you first of all to clarify, who first suggested that the invasion should in fact take place in your understanding?
Undoubtedly, the suggestion came as a Caribbean initiative spearheaded by the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who telephoned me and said that we could really not let outsiders seek to take advantage of the situation, that there should be a Caribbean initiative to get rid of anarchy in Grenada, specifically an OECS initiative, since Grenada was a part of that grouping. I say that without any fear of contradiction. I mean, I'm fully aware of the issue, and I do really assure you that that is how it happened.
Next week we will continue as we take a look at the mobilization of the Caribbean forces, the United States' involvement, and the role played by Barbados. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community.
Barbados.